What kind of man turns his back when a woman lets her dress fall? That question hung in the cold night air long before Josie Granger ever stepped into Elias McKenna's life. And it would change everything in Ash Valley. The mud of Ash Valley held on to Elias like it wanted to claim him. Every step sucked at his patched boots, making it feel like the whole town was trying to drag him down. He had come in on foot, tired to his bones, after losing the only companion he had left in this world, his mare, Bess. He'd buried her under a stack of stones south of the pass, one last mercy after she'd taken a bullet meant for the family he was helping. He walked into town with $10 in his pocket, a worn gun belt on his hips, and a loneliness so deep it felt like an extra shadow following him. Ash Valley looked like a wounded thing. Raw wooden buildings leaned in the wet wind. Smoke from the stamp mill rolled across the rooftops like a storm cloud. The street was more river than road, miners sloshing through it with hollow eyes and mud-caked pants. Nobody spared Elias more than a passing look. A man on foot didn't matter. A man with nothing had nothing others wanted. He headed to the sheriff's office first. Better to know what snakes lived in a place before you stepped on one. Sheriff Brody sat behind his desk, his gut pushing hard against his vest buttons. His cheeks were red and shiny. His watch chain glittered across his belly like it belonged to a far richer man. Elias kept his hat in his hands. "Afternoon, Sheriff." "Passing through, looking for work." Brody looked him up and down with lazy, uninterested eyes. "Mine's hiring. Plenty of work for a pickaxe, but you don't look like a miner." "I was a stockman," Elias said. The words tasted dry. "Lost my horse." "Unfortunate," Brody said, though he didn't sound like he cared at all. "Town's on edge. Miners think they're owed more than they get, stirring trouble. Keep your head down." Elias glanced toward the wall behind Brody. No wanted posters, no notices, no law chasing lawbreakers. Either the town was perfect, unlikely, or the law served whoever paid the most. The gold watch on Brody's gut answered that question. "I appreciate the warning," Elias said, turning to leave. "Drifter," Brody called after him. "Rafe Conrad runs the Lucky Ribbon Saloon, and most everything else. Stay on his good side." It wasn't advice, it was a threat. Elias stepped back into the cold mud with a heavy heart. Ash Valley was rotten at the core. He could smell it. By nightfall, he was starving and followed the smell of food and cheap whiskey into the Lucky Ribbon Saloon. The moment he pushed through the swinging doors, the room swallowed him whole. The air was thick with cigar smoke, sweat, and perfume. Miners yelled over a stiff little piano tune. Cards slapped against tables. Coins clinked. Every man looked half broken, half wild. Elias took a small table in the corner where shadows hid him. He ordered a beer and a plate of beans, stretching them out slow. He wasn't there for fun, or cards, or trouble. He just needed warmth. A quiet place to breathe. Then he saw her. Josie Granger stepped onto the small stage at the back of the saloon, wearing a faded crimson dress. The fabric clung in some places, hung loose in others, tired from too many nights under too many eyes. Her hair, chestnut brown, was pinned up but coming loose as she moved. She was striking, but not in a soft, gentle way. Her beauty had sharp edges, built from surviving instead of living. She danced with practiced grace, but her gray eyes were far away, walled off, empty. The room devoured her like she wasn't a person, just something to stare at. Coins hit the stage. Whistles rose. Every man leaned forward. Every pair of eyes crawled over her. Except one. Elias looked down at his hands instead, at the scratches on his knuckles, at the muddy floor, at the water stains on the wall. Anywhere but at her. It was a small thing, but in a room full of hungry wolves, it was everything. Josie felt it instantly. She bent to pick up a coin, expecting the same burning eyes on her. But one set wasn't there. She found him in the corner, quiet. Still, looking away on purpose. Something sharp inside her loosened, just for a breath. When her set ended, she went behind the bar to wipe glasses. Then a shadow fell over her. Rafe Conrad. Clean suit, hard smile. Eyes black as tar. "You're looking tired, Josie," he said. "It's been a long night," she answered, not meeting his eyes. He grabbed her wrist, lightly but cruel in meaning. "Not long enough. Mr. Abernathy and his friends want company." Her stomach tightened. "I've danced my sets, Rafe. I'm done." "Your dead husband left you with debt," Rafe whispered, smile razor thin. "You work until I say you don't. Understand?" She tried to pull free. He tightened his grip. "Let go," she said, her voice shaking. "That ain't your decision." "It stopped being private when you put your hands on her," a quiet voice said behind them. Elias had risen from his table. He didn't touch his gun. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there. Rafe turned toward him, annoyance flashing into anger. "This is my saloon, Drifter. She's my employee. Stay out of it." "What does she owe?" Elias asked. "That's none of your—" "How much?" His voice stayed calm, deadly calm. Josie whispered, $388. Elias reached into his pocket, took out the $10 he had earned saving the Miller family. He placed it on the bar. "That's for her. Let her be tonight." Josie laughed. A broken, painful sound. "A start?" she said bitterly. "Don't you dare pity me." She walked away, straight toward Rafe's back office, her body rigid with shame and fury. Elias stood there alone, the $10 lying useless on the polished bar. Hours later, in a cold cabin on the edge of town, a soft knock came to his door. He opened it. It was her. And what happened next would break them both before it healed them. What kind of pain makes a woman offer herself just to prove she isn't a burden? That question hit Elias McKenna harder than any bullet ever had. Josie Granger stood in the doorway of his cold cabin, wind pushing at her dark hair, her thin cloak trembling around her shoulders. She didn't speak. She just stepped inside, her eyes full of a storm he didn't understand. Elias closed the door behind her. The room was dim, lit only by moonlight slipping through the dirty window. She stood in the center like she didn't know how she got there, like something inside her had pushed her feet forward before her mind could stop it. Then her fingers found the tie of her cloak. She let it fall. It dropped to the floor like a spill of shadow. Under it, she wore the crimson dress from the saloon. The dress she hated. The dress she survived in. The dress that made men think they were allowed to take. She turned her back to Elias, hands shaking as they reached for the laces. Before he could understand what she meant to do, the dress slid off her shoulders and fell at her feet. She stood in nothing but a thin shift, pale in the moonlight, her skin glowing like she was made of frost and heartbreak. Elias froze. A rush of heat shot through him so fast, it made him lightheaded. Every instinct in him wanted to cross the room, pull her into his arms, kiss every bruise on her skin, and promise she'd never be hurt again. And that was exactly why he didn't move. Josie stood there, trembling, waiting, expecting him to take what she had been trained to give, what the world expected from her, what men always wanted. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is what I have. This is what men pay for." Elias felt something inside him crack open. "No," he said, but it came out like a choked breath. She didn't turn around. "You offered me $10 tonight, $10 of pity. I won't be your charity case." Her shoulders were stiff, her spine straight, bravery carved into bone. She was offering her body just to regain a scrap of control over her life, over herself. But Elias wasn't looking at her body. He was looking at her bruises, silent, ugly marks across her waist and ribs, marks Rafe Conrad had left on her like she was an object, not a woman. His heart roared with fury and sorrow. Elias turned away from her so fast, it was almost violent. He faced the wall, fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut so tight it hurt. "Put this on," he forced out, voice shaking. He reached blindly for his heavy wool coat, the one that still smelled like trail dust and pine, and held it behind him without turning. The silence that followed felt endless, Then he felt her take the coat from his hand. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't turn. He listened to the soft rustle as she wrapped herself in it. He listened to the door click open. Then he heard her footsteps fade into the cold night. Only when he was sure she was gone did Elias let the tears fall. Quiet, broken tears for the woman who believed she had nothing worth offering but her body. For the sister he had failed to protect years ago. For the heavy ghosts that lived in him. The next morning before sunrise, Josie left the coat folded neatly on his porch. For days after, something shifted in the saloon. Elias didn't look at Josie on stage anymore, but she still felt his presence like a steady hand resting on her back. He fixed things quietly. The hinge on her door. The loose board on her porch. A loaf of bread left in her satchel. A wedge of cheese wrapped in paper. He never said a word. But she knew every act of kindness cut her deeper than cruelty ever had. Kindness forced her to remember the person she used to be, a girl who once believed love was real. She tried to stay cold, tried to ignore him, tried to act like his kindness hurt her rather than healed her. But one night, a drunk miner grabbed her arm and wouldn't let go. Elias rose from the shadows like a wolf. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just stared, a quiet, deadly stare that made the miner's face turn white. The man released her like he'd been burned. Elias walked away without looking at her. It made her breath catch in her chest. As the days passed, their lives tangled quietly without either of them asking for it. One afternoon, she found him fixing a fence rail near the livery. "Fixing broken things seems to be your hobby," she said. He kept working. "A loose rail spooks horses." "And a loose hinge? Does that spook saloon girls too?" she pushed, trying to provoke him. "A door that doesn't lock is trouble," he answered simply. "And the food you left? Was that trouble too?" Quote, "Hunger is trouble," he said. His calm answers left her shaking inside. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It was something more dangerous. Respect. Her ribs ached from Rafe's punches. But something else hurt worse. Something she couldn't name. When Elias walked into the general store a week later, he felt the town's eyes on him. Women whispering. Men staring. Words like stones thrown under breath. That's him. The drifter with the saloon girl. She's living with him. Sin masquerading as charity. Elias ignored them. But Josie saw the scorn too. And it cut her deep. She had lived with shame for years, but now Elias was paying for her past too. The weight of it made her chest feel tight. That night she didn't speak to him. He didn't speak either. But their silence was thick, with things both of them were afraid to say. It didn't stay quiet for long. The next day, at the livery, 3 of Rafe Conrad's men cornered Elias. One of them, Harker, spit chewing tobacco near Elias's boots. "Well, well." Ash Valley's holy man, Harker sneered. "Saving lost women now?" "I've got no fight with you," Elias said. "Oh, but I've got a fight with you. That saloon girl belongs to Rafe. And you think you can take what belongs to him?" "She doesn't belong to anyone," Elias replied, voice calm as ice. Harker laughed. "She's used up stock. A man would have to be desperate to." Elias didn't let him finish. Harker swung first. Hard. His punch split Elias's lip. The second hit bruised his jaw. Elias took both blows. Then he stepped forward and hit Harker once. A single, clean punch. Harker dropped like a sack of grain. His friends backed away. They wanted no part of the look in Elias's eyes, a quiet fury he kept locked behind a wall of grief. Elias walked away with blood on his mouth and fire in his heart. Josie saw the bruise the moment he stepped into the cabin. "What happened?" she whispered. "Nothing. Don't lie to me." She cleaned the cut on his lip with gentle fingers that trembled with anger. "They said something about me, didn't they?" He didn't answer. She knew. "You can't fight the whole town," she said. "Men like Rafe own everything. You'll never win." Quote, But Elias wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking about justice. And the next morning, still bruised, he marched to Sheriff Brody's office. He tried to do things the right way. He tried to report Rafe. But Sheriff Brody just leaned back and said, "Rafe is a businessman. Josie is property. That's the law." It was a slap to the soul. When Elias walked out of the office, something inside him had changed forever. That night, the small cabin was heavy with silence. A shared, breaking silence. Josie stood by the fire, wearing one of Elias's worn flannel shirts. It hung past her knees, soft and familiar. The way she stood, bare feet on the wooden floor, hair loose, face lit by the fire, made Elias's heart feel like it was being squeezed in a fist. She turned toward him. She didn't speak. She just stood there with the firelight glowing through the thin fabric, her curves soft and clear, her eyes full of a question she was terrified to ask. It was not seduction. It was need. It was the silent plea. "Tell me I matter. Tell me I am more than what they made me." Elias felt the world tilt. He wanted her with a force that scared him. He wanted to cross the room and pull her into his arms and never let go. But he knew what she carried. He knew what he carried. And he was afraid, terrified, that if he touched her, he'd break something they couldn't fix. With a strangled sound, he stumbled backward and fled into the night. Snow fell heavy around him. He stood there shaking, breath burning in his throat. The cabin door flew open. Josie stepped out barefoot, snow melting in her hair, her voice breaking as she shouted into the cold. "Why won't you touch me?" He turned slowly, his face twisted with anguish. "Because if I do," he whispered, "I won't be able to stop." She froze, and then something shattered. Elias strode to her in 2 long steps. He cupped her face in his rough hands, his eyes full of pain and longing and fear. He kissed her, not soft, not slow. A desperate, breaking kiss that tasted like tears and winter and 2 souls trying to save each other. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "You deserve more," he said, breath trembling. "You deserve more than a broken man trying to save you." Then he walked into the night, the storm swallowing him whole. Josie stood in the doorway, shaking. For the first time in her life, a kiss didn't feel like a claim. It felt like a promise and a warning. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't know the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to come. A quiet morning never warned anyone of the kind of storm that was coming. For 2 weeks after that kiss in the snow, Ash Valley looked peaceful from the outside, but inside that peace, trouble waited like a wolf hiding in tall grass. Rafe Conrad had been arrested for forgery. The town whispered. The sheriff panicked. But the law in Ash Valley was like wet paper. It tore wherever money pushed it. Soon enough, Rafe walked out of that jail cell, wearing the same sharp suit and the same poisonous smile. And he wanted one thing: Josie Granger back in chains. Elias McKenna saw it coming the moment Mr. Abernathy rode out to the cabin one cold afternoon, breathless and pale. "He's out, Elias," Abernathy warned. "Rafe's gathering men, hard men, says you stole his property, says you ruined his business and his pride. You two need to leave tonight." Elias didn't leave. He boarded up the cabin windows, checked his Winchester twice, loaded every shell he owned, gave Josie a tiny Derringer pistol with only 1 shot. Josie held the small gun like it burned her hand. "And what do I do if they come in here?" she whispered. "Don't let them take you," Elias said. His voice broke on the last word. Josie didn't cry. She nodded once. Small, fierce, brave. The sun went down. The night fell heavy and strange. The world turned so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. Then flames blazed into the sky. A torch hit the barn. Another slammed into the cabin roof. Fire roared upward with a hungry scream. "They're burning us out," Elias growled. He shoved open the cabin door and fired 2 shots toward the trees. Muzzle flashes lit the night. Gunfire exploded back at him. Snow kicked up in bursts around his boots. "Elias!" Josie cried from inside. "Stay low!" he shouted. He rolled behind a woodpile and worked the Winchester fast and clean. One shadow in the trees fell, another scrambled for cover. But there were too many. 6, maybe 7 men, maybe more. Elias fought like a man with nothing left to lose, and one person left to protect. Inside the cabin, Josie lay on the floor, hand clamped over her mouth. Smoke seeped through the cracks. Every gunshot in the night felt like it exploded inside her chest. She prayed each loud crack wasn't Elias falling. Then she heard it, the sharp thud of a bullet finding flesh, a cry from outside, followed by silence. Josie ran to the door even as the fire crawled across the roof. She saw Elias through waves of heat, his body collapsing onto the snow, blood spreading fast beneath him. "No!" she screamed. Rafe's men were running toward him, laughing like they'd already won. Josie didn't even think. She ran into the night, barefoot, terrified, crying. She dropped to her knees beside Elias. His face was white, his eyes half open but unfocused. Blood soaked through his shirt. His breath was shallow, barely there. "Elias," she sobbed. "Don't leave me. Not now. Not like this." His lips moved, forming a faint whisper. "Run." "No," she cried. "Not without you." Shouts grew behind her. Rafe's men were closing in. Josie hooked her arms under Elias's and dragged him, inch by inch, toward the burning barn. Heat hit her face like a wall. Sparks rained over her hair and dress. She didn't care. She dragged him inside the smoky barn and collapsed behind a stack of unburned hay bales. Elias lay limp beside her. Josie pressed her shaking fingers to his neck. A pulse, weak. But there. She refused to lose him. Through the smoke, she saw the Winchester lying near the doorway where it had been dropped. She crawled to it, choking on the heat, and pulled it back to their hiding spot. A shadow stepped into the barn. A man with a gun. Josie could hear him breathing, searching. "Come on, girl," he called softly. "Rafe wants you alive." Josie gripped the rifle with both shaking hands. She had never fired one before. She aimed at the dark shape, pulled the trigger. The blast knocked her onto her back. The man screamed and fell, rolling out of the barn. Josie scrambled to reload, tears streaming down her smoke-covered face. She would not let them take Elias. She would die first. Then, new gunshots. Not at her, at them. Voices shouting. Mr. Stinson and his son burst into the clearing, firing their old rifles at Rafe's men. The attack broke apart like a stampede. Men fled into the trees. Only Rafe stood his ground, his face twisted with hate. He raised his gun and charged the barn. "You think you can kill me?" he roared at Josie. "You belong to me!" She rose to her feet, eyes clear and cold. She lifted the Winchester again. Rafe aimed at her chest. She fired first. The bullet hit him square. His face shifted from fury to disbelief. He fell to his knees, then into the snow, dead. The night went silent, except for the crackle of dying flames. Josie dropped the rifle and fell beside Elias. He stirred, opened his eyes just enough to see her shaking face. "Don't let this be the end," he whispered. She grabbed his hand. "It's not the end," she said. "It's the beginning, if you stop closing your eyes." Elias didn't die. The Stinsons carried him to their farmhouse, and Josie stayed at his side day and night. Fever burned him. He muttered the name, Ellie, and Josie held his hand until the fever broke. A week later, U.S. Marshals rode into Ash Valley. Sheriff Brody was removed. Rafe's men scattered. The law finally returned to the valley like a long-lost friend. Spring arrived with muddy trails and soft new grass. Elias stood again, thin, bandaged, but alive. Josie stood beside him as they looked at the ruins of the burned cabin. "Where do we go now?" she whispered. Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Anywhere you want." They built a home together farther up the valley, a small house of logs, a garden, a porch overlooking the pines. People whispered when Josie went into town, but she carried herself with quiet strength, untouched by their judgment. Elias rebuilt his life. Josie rebuilt her heart. Late that summer, as golden lights spread across the valley, Elias walked to Josie while she stood near the garden fence. He held out a thin silver ring worn down by time. "This was my sister's," he said softly. "It's the only piece of family I have left. I want it to be yours." Her breath caught, tears filled her eyes. But they were warm tears, healing tears. She nodded. He slid the ring onto her finger. Weeks later, on the day they were to marry, Josie stepped out of their cabin, wearing the crimson dress she had once hated, the dress she had let fall in shame. Today she wore it with pride. Elias came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him, the valley golden in front of them. "You can look now," she whispered. And he did. He looked at her with love stronger than any pain they'd survived. And the Wild West finally felt like home.